Part 1: The Unseen Connection. Lily sat at the head of the long, polished conference table, the morning sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the sleek corporate office. Her neatly organized notebook was open in front of her, though her mind was running at 100 miles per hour. It was another meeting for the Danvers Corporation, her employer for the last 5 years, where she had climbed the ranks from a lowly assistant to a project leader. Every step of her journey had been marked by late nights, endless work, and unwavering dedication. Yet, even with all her success, there was something missing. "Focus, Lily," she muttered to herself, quickly straightening as her assistant tapped on her shoulder. "Miss Campbell, the meeting's about to start." "Are you ready?" her assistant, Jane, asked, offering her a reassuring smile. Yes, I'm ready," Lily responded, masking her inner turmoil with the practiced professionalism that had earned her respect within the company. As the room began to fill with her team, Lily could feel her carefully constructed walls of control slipping just slightly. She prided herself on always being in charge. The idea of vulnerability made her uncomfortable, weak even. But lately, something inside her had been stirring, a longing for more than just the corporate accolades and personal victories. Today's meeting was a crucial one. Danvers Corporation had secured an exclusive contract with Phoenix Technologies, a leading tech company, and it was Lily's job to oversee the project. But that wasn't what had her on edge. It was the fact that the CEO of Phoenix Technologies himself, Daniel Westbrook, was attending the meeting in person. She'd heard the rumors about him, charismatic, intense, and shrouded in mystery. His rise to success was as much a source of fascination as his private life, which seemed carefully guarded. Lily adjusted her blazer, mentally preparing herself for whatever surprises might arise. She had learned the hard way that control was everything in her world. If she could control the situation, she could manage anything. When the door opened and Daniel Westbrook entered, the air in the room seemed to shift. Conversations quieted, and all eyes turned to him. Lily tried to maintain her calm, but as he walked toward her, she couldn't help but feel a sense of intrigue. Daniel Westbrook wasn't like anyone she had expected. He was tall and carried himself with a casual confidence that bordered on arrogance but remained just shy of it. His tailored suit fit perfectly, exuding sophistication without being flashy, and his sharp, green eyes scanned the room with an intensity that made Lily's pulse quicken. As he approached her, he smiled. It wasn't a smirk or the typical fake grin she was used to from corporate leaders. It was a real, genuine smile, one that reached his eyes. And that unsettled her. "You must be Lily Campbell," Daniel said in a smooth voice that seemed to resonate in the quiet room. "I've heard a lot about you." Lily quickly stood up and extended her hand, determined to keep her composure. "Mr. Westbrook, it's a pleasure. We're thrilled to have you here today." "Please, call me Daniel," he replied, shaking her hand firmly. His touch was warm, and Lily couldn't help but notice how steady and strong it was. "I've been looking forward to working with you." Lily felt her carefully guarded walls flicker for just a second as their eyes met. There was something about Daniel that made her uneasy, not in a bad way, but in a way that felt unfamiliar, like she was standing at the edge of something she couldn't quite understand. The meeting proceeded smoothly, with Daniel actively participating and offering insights that impressed Lily and her team. He wasn't just a figurehead at Phoenix Technologies, he knew his business inside and out. But it was more than that. There was an ease with which he moved through the conversation, blending charm and intellect effortlessly. By the end of the meeting, as the team began to gather their notes and pack up, Daniel lingered for a moment longer, approaching Lily once more. "You've got quite a team here, Miss Campbell," he said, his tone casual but laced with a hint of something more. "I can see why you're leading this project." "Thank you," Lily responded, her voice steady, though inside, she felt a flutter of something, curiosity, maybe? Attraction? She couldn't quite place it. Daniel glanced at his watch, then back at her, as if contemplating something. "I was wondering," he said, lowering his voice so only she could hear, "if you'd be open to discussing some additional ideas over coffee sometime this week." "Off the clock, of course." Lily's immediate instinct was to decline. After all, she had a firm rule about mixing business and personal life. But something about Daniel made her hesitate. The way he looked at her, the calm intensity in his gaze, it stirred something within her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. What harm could there be in a simple coffee? She thought. "Sure," she said before she could change her mind. "I think I can find some time for that." Daniel smiled again, a look of satisfaction crossing his face. "Great. I'll have my assistant send over some options." As Daniel left the room, Lily sat back in her chair, exhaling deeply. What had just happened? She was a woman who prided herself on control, yet here she was, agreeing to a coffee date, no, a meeting, she reminded herself, with someone who unsettled her in a way no one else ever had. That night, as Lily prepared to leave the office, her mind was still reeling from the day's events. She had worked hard to get to where she was, carefully curating a life that was focused, disciplined, and free from distractions. Relationships, love, they were complications she didn't have time for. But Daniel Westbrook seemed like the kind of complication she couldn't easily ignore. Back in her apartment, Lily tried to shake off the lingering thoughts of Daniel. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat on her sofa, watching the city lights twinkle outside her window. But no matter how hard she tried to focus on something else, her mind kept returning to him, his smile, the way he looked at her, the way he made her feel seen in a way she hadn't experienced in a long time. Lily was used to being in control, yet there was something about Daniel that made her feel like the rules didn't apply when it came to him. It was both exciting and terrifying. Part 2. Breaking the ice. Lily spent the next few days immersed in her work, trying to push the thought of Daniel out of her mind. It wasn't like her to be distracted by anything that wasn't related to her career, but something about him lingered. Every time she tried to focus, his smile, his gaze, and the way he seemed to see right through her carefully constructed walls kept intruding on her thoughts. When the email from his assistant arrived in her inbox, suggesting a meeting for coffee at a quaint cafe not far from the office, Lily hesitated. She knew what this was, or at least, she thought she did. It wasn't strictly business. But still, she found herself agreeing to it. Something inside her was curious, intrigued by the possibility of what might happen if she let herself explore whatever this was. The day of their coffee meeting arrived, and Lily felt more nervous than she had expected. She was used to being in control, and she hated the feeling of uncertainty. As she approached the cafe, she reminded herself that this was just a casual conversation, nothing more. When she walked inside, Daniel was already there, seated at a corner table with a cup of coffee in hand. He looked up as she entered, and their eyes met across the room. His expression was calm, a faint smile playing on his lips as he waved her over. "Lily," he said warmly as she sat down. "Glad you could make it." She nodded, trying to suppress the flutter in her chest. "Thanks for inviting me. It's nice to take a break from the office once in a while." Daniel chuckled. "I'm sure someone like you doesn't get many breaks. You're quite the powerhouse at Danvers Corporation." Lily raised an eyebrow. "Do you make a habit of researching the people you work with?" "Only the ones I find interesting," he replied smoothly, his gaze never leaving hers. There it was again, that intensity, that sense that he was seeing past the surface and into something deeper. It made Lily feel both exposed and intrigued. As they chatted, the conversation flowed effortlessly. Daniel was charming, but not in an overbearing way. He asked her about her career, her ambitions, and her thoughts on the project they were working on. But beyond that, he seemed genuinely interested in who she was as a person. He didn't just ask about her work, he asked about her life, her hobbies, her dreams. It was strange, being asked about these things by someone who was supposed to be just a business associate. But with Daniel, it felt natural. Lily found herself laughing at his dry sense of humor, something she hadn't expected from someone with such a polished, serious exterior. He told her stories about his travels, the challenges of running Phoenix Technologies, and even a few embarrassing moments from his early career that had them both laughing. The conversation was light, but there was an underlying connection that Lily couldn't ignore. As the afternoon wore on, the cafe grew quieter, and the two of them sat there, immersed in each other's company. It felt like they were in their own little world, where time didn't matter, and nothing existed outside of that moment. But as the sun began to set, reality started to creep back in. Lily glanced at her watch, realizing how much time had passed. "I should probably get going," she said reluctantly. "I have a few things to wrap up before tomorrow." Daniel nodded, though he didn't seem in any rush to leave. "Of course. I don't want to keep you." As they stood up, Daniel hesitated for a moment, then said, "I'm glad we did this, Lily. It's rare to meet someone who's as driven and passionate as you are, but also grounded." "You're impressive." Lily felt her cheeks flush slightly at the compliment, but she quickly brushed it off with a smile. "Thanks. I think we make a good team." He nodded, his gaze lingering on her for just a moment longer. "I agree. I hope we can do this again sometime." Lily wasn't sure what to say. There was a part of her that wanted to keep things professional, to maintain the distance she always kept between herself and others. But another part of her, a part she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge in a long time, wanted to say yes. She wanted to see where this could go. "We'll see," she replied, leaving the door open just enough for possibility. As they walked out of the cafe, Daniel offered her a ride home, but Lily declined. She needed the walk to clear her head. As she strolled through the city streets, the cool evening air brushing against her skin, she couldn't help but replay the conversation in her mind. There was something different about Daniel, something that made her feel like she could let her guard down, even just a little. But as she reached her apartment and closed the door behind her, Lily's logical side kicked in. This was dangerous. She had worked too hard to get where she was, and the last thing she needed was a distraction. Relationships were messy, unpredictable, and they rarely ended well. She had seen it happen to friends, colleagues, even family. No, she couldn't afford to let herself get swept up in something like this. Stay focused, she told herself. You have a job to do. The following week, Lily threw herself back into work. The project with Phoenix Technologies was progressing smoothly, and she made sure to keep her interactions with Daniel strictly professional. But despite her best efforts, there was a tension between them that was hard to ignore. Every time they were in the same room, it was as if the air crackled with unspoken words, with things left unsaid. One afternoon, during a project meeting at Phoenix Technologies headquarters, Lily found herself alone in a conference room with Daniel after the rest of the team had left. It was a brief moment, just the two of them, and Lily could feel the familiar tension building in the air. Daniel leaned against the table, his eyes locked on hers. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his tone light but probing. Lily raised an eyebrow, trying to keep her tone casual. "I've been busy. We have a lot to do." "Busy, huh?" Daniel smiled, that easy charm slipping back into place. "Or maybe you're just afraid to admit you enjoyed our little coffee meeting." Lily crossed her arms, her defenses going up instinctively. "There's nothing to admit. It was a nice conversation, but I don't mix business with personal." Daniel studied her for a moment, then pushed off the table and took a step closer. "You're right. Business and personal don't always mix well. But sometimes, when you find something that feels right, it's worth breaking a few rules." His words hung in the air between them, and Lily's heart raced. She hated that he was able to get under her skin so easily, but at the same time, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. "Daniel," she began, her voice steady but her resolve wavering, "we're working together on a major project. This can't go anywhere." He didn't move closer, but his presence seemed to fill the room. "I get it. You like control, and you're good at it. But sometimes, you have to let go a little. Take a chance." Lily met his gaze, her walls crumbling just a little. She wanted to believe that she could keep things strictly professional, that she could maintain the distance she always prided herself on. But deep down, she knew that something was shifting, and Daniel was at the center of it. "I'll think about it," she said softly, her words carrying more weight than she intended. Daniel smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made her stomach flip. "That's all I'm asking." As Lily left the building that day, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at the edge of something big, something that had the power to change everything. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure if she was ready to walk away from it. Part 3: Close Encounters. Lily spent the next few days torn between her professional instincts and the undeniable attraction she felt toward Daniel. She tried her best to stay focused, throwing herself into work with renewed determination, but the memory of their conversation lingered in the back of her mind. His words echoed through her thoughts. "Sometimes, when you find something that feels right, it's worth breaking a few rules." Lily had always lived by her rules, rules that kept her grounded and in control. She had seen firsthand what happened when people let emotions get the best of them. Her own mother, a brilliant woman with endless potential, had lost everything when she became too dependent on her relationships. Watching her mother struggle to rebuild her life after her father left had cemented one thing in Lily's mind: she would never let anyone else have that kind of power over her. And yet, here she was, standing at the edge of something that felt both terrifying and exciting. A few days after their last encounter, Daniel's assistant sent another email, requesting a follow-up meeting with Lily. It was strictly business, of course, but the thought of seeing him again made her heart race. She quickly dismissed the feeling, reminding herself that she was in control of her emotions, not the other way around. The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon at Phoenix Technologies headquarters. As Lily entered the sleek, modern building, she took a deep breath, mentally preparing herself for what was sure to be a challenging conversation, not because of the project, but because of Daniel. When she arrived at the conference room, Daniel was already there, waiting for her. He stood by the window, gazing out at the city skyline, his back to her. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow across the room, creating a soft, intimate atmosphere that immediately made Lily feel on edge. He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Lily," he said, his voice low and steady. "Thanks for coming." She nodded, keeping her tone professional. "Of course. Let's get started." They sat down and began discussing the project updates, but Lily couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more hanging in the air between them. She could feel Daniel's gaze on her as they worked through the agenda, and every time their eyes met, it sent a jolt of electricity through her. After about an hour, they had covered all the necessary points, and the meeting was winding down. Lily gathered her notes, ready to make a quick exit, but Daniel wasn't done. "Lily," he said, leaning back in his chair, his gaze intense. "Can I ask you something? Off the record." Lily froze, her heart pounding. "What is it?" He paused, studying her carefully before speaking. "Why do you keep pushing me away?" Her breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected him to be so direct. "I'm not pushing you away," she replied, though even she could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Aren't you? Every time we get close to something real, you pull back. I get it, you're focused, ambitious, and you like to be in control. But what are you so afraid of?" Lily's defenses went up immediately. "I'm not afraid of anything," she snapped, feeling a surge of frustration. "I just don't want to mix business with personal." Daniel finished for her, his tone gentle but firm. "I'm not asking for anything inappropriate, Lily. I just want to know you. The real you, not just the project leader, not just the professional. The woman behind all of that." Lily stood up, her hands trembling slightly as she gathered her things. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice colder than she intended. "We're colleagues, Daniel. That's all this is." But even as she said the words, she knew they weren't true. There was something more between them, something she couldn't quite define but couldn't deny either. Daniel stood up as well, taking a step toward her. "I think you do know, Lily. And I think you're scared to admit it." She glared at him, feeling a mix of anger and vulnerability. "You don't know anything about me." "Then let me," he said softly, his voice steady and calm. "Let me in, just a little." For a moment, Lily felt the urge to let go, to allow herself to be vulnerable for the first time in years. But the fear of losing control, of being hurt, was too strong. She couldn't do it. "I can't," she whispered, shaking her head. "I'm sorry, but I can't." Without another word, she turned and left the room, her heart pounding in her chest. As she walked down the hallway, she felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. She wouldn't let herself fall apart over this. She couldn't. The weekend passed in a blur, with Lily trying to focus on anything but Daniel. She spent hours catching up on work, cleaning her apartment, and distracting herself with errands. But no matter what she did, her thoughts kept drifting back to him, his words, his gaze, the way he seemed to see through all of her defenses. On Sunday evening, she received a text from Jane, her assistant. "Hey, boss, just wanted to remind you about the client dinner tomorrow night with Daniel Westbrook. It's at 7 p.m. at the Goldfinch. Let me know if you need anything." Lily groaned. She had forgotten about the dinner. It was a formal event with several key clients, and of course, Daniel would be there. She briefly considered canceling, but she knew that would be unprofessional. She couldn't let her personal feelings interfere with work. The next evening, Lily found herself standing in front of her mirror, adjusting her dress and checking her makeup. She had chosen a sleek, elegant black dress that was professional but still stylish. As she slipped on her heels, she took a deep breath. She would get through this dinner, keep things professional, and go home. Simple. When she arrived at the Goldfinch, the restaurant was buzzing with activity. Waiters moved gracefully between tables, and the soft hum of conversation filled the air. Lily spotted Daniel almost immediately, seated at a long table with several other clients and executives. He looked up as she approached, and their eyes met across the room. His expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his gaze, something that made Lily's heart skip a beat. She greeted the other clients politely and took a seat at the table, keeping her focus on the conversation at hand. The dinner proceeded smoothly, with lively discussions about the project and potential future collaborations. But throughout the evening, Lily could feel Daniel's presence beside her like a magnet, pulling her attention away from the conversation. As the dinner wound down, the clients began to filter out, leaving just a few of them at the table. Daniel leaned over slightly, his voice low. "Can we talk?" Lily hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right." They stepped outside into the cool night air, the sounds of the city providing a distant hum in the background. Daniel turned to face her, his expression serious. "Lily, I'm not going to keep pushing you if you don't want this," he said, his voice steady. "But I need to know, are you really not interested, or are you just scared?" Lily looked away, her heart pounding. "It's not that simple," she murmured. "Maybe it is," Daniel replied, taking a step closer. "You've built these walls around yourself, and I get it. You're strong, independent, and you don't need anyone. But that doesn't mean you can't want someone. It doesn't mean you can't let someone in." Lily felt a lump forming in her throat. He was right. She had spent so long guarding herself against the possibility of getting hurt that she had forgotten what it felt like to let someone get close. I don't know how, she admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to let someone in. Daniel reached out, gently taking her hand. Then let me show you. For a moment, they stood there in silence, the weight of his words hanging in the air between them. Lily's heart raced, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She had always prided herself on being in control, but with Daniel, she wasn't sure if she wanted to be. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility of something more. Part 4: The Edge of Trust. Lily spent the night after the dinner replaying Daniel's words over and over in her mind. You don't need anyone, but that doesn't mean you can't want someone. It was the truth she had been running from for so long. She had spent years perfecting the art of being untouchable, of never needing anyone else. And yet, there was a part of her that longed for connection, something deeper than the surface-level relationships she had always maintained. She woke up the next morning feeling restless. It was a Monday, and the start of another busy work week, but the thought of Daniel lingered in her mind, distracting her as she went about her day. She tried to focus on her tasks, but everything seemed to remind her of the way he had looked at her, the sincerity in his voice when he asked her to let him in. By mid-morning, she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed her phone and, before she could second-guess herself, sent Daniel a text, "Can we meet tonight?" His response came almost instantly, "Name the time and place." Lily's heart raced as she typed out the name of a quiet cafe she frequented near her apartment. It wasn't a formal setting like the corporate dinners or meetings they were used to. It was casual, intimate, and it made her feel nervous in a way she hadn't expected. The rest of the day passed in a blur, with Lily struggling to focus on anything but the thought of seeing Daniel again. When the workday finally ended, she rushed home to freshen up, her heart pounding with anticipation and a hint of fear. This was new territory for her, unfamiliar and unpredictable. But for the first time in years, she was willing to take the risk. That evening, as she walked into the small cafe, she spotted Daniel immediately. He was seated at a table near the back, his posture relaxed, but there was a tension in his expression that mirrored her own feelings. When he looked up and saw her, a smile tugged at the corners of his lips, and Lily felt her nerves ease just a little. "Hey," she greeted him softly as she sat down across from him. "Hey," Daniel replied, his voice warm but cautious. There was something in his eyes, an uncertainty that told her he wasn't sure where this conversation would go. And neither was she. For a few moments, they sat in silence, the quiet hum of the cafe around them. Then Daniel spoke, his voice gentle but direct. "You asked to meet. Does that mean you've made a decision?" Lily hesitated, her fingers toying with the edge of her coffee cup. She had spent years avoiding vulnerability, and now, sitting across from Daniel, she felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure of whether to jump. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm tired of running." Daniel nodded, his expression softening. "I'm not asking you to have it all figured out, Lily. I just want you to be open to the possibility. To take things one step at a time." Lily looked at him, her walls slowly crumbling. "And what if it doesn't work?" What if we get too close, and it all falls apart? Daniel leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. There's always a risk. But isn't it worth it if there's a chance for something real? His words struck a chord deep within her. For so long, she had been focused on avoiding pain, on protecting herself from the possibility of failure or heartbreak. But in doing so, she had also shut herself off from the possibility of love, of connection. Maybe it was time to take a different kind of risk. She took a deep breath, her heart racing. Okay, she said softly. I'm willing to try. Daniel's smile was slow and genuine, lighting up his face in a way that made her chest tighten. That's all I'm asking. They spent the rest of the evening talking, their conversation flowing easily as the initial tension between them melted away. Daniel shared more about his life, his struggles with balancing work and personal relationships, his own fears of vulnerability, and Lily found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. She told him about her childhood, about her mother's struggles, and how it had shaped her view on relationships. It wasn't easy, but with Daniel, it felt natural. By the time they left the cafe, it was late, and the streets were quiet. As they stood outside, a cool breeze brushing against their skin, Daniel turned to her, his expression serious but hopeful. Let's take this slow, he said, his voice low. No pressure, no expectations. Just see where it goes. Lily nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in years. I think I can do that. Daniel smiled, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, he reached out and took her hand in his touch warm and steady. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like the start of something new, something that scared her but excited her at the same time. As they walked down the street together, hand in hand, Lily couldn't help but wonder if this was what she had been missing all along, a chance to let go, to be vulnerable, to connect with someone in a way that was both terrifying and beautiful. The following weeks were a delicate balancing act for Lily. She and Daniel agreed to keep their relationship quiet for now, not wanting to mix their personal and professional lives any more than necessary. It wasn't easy, especially when they had to interact during meetings and project updates, but they managed. There were stolen glances, brief touches, and secret smiles that only the two of them understood. Outside of work, their relationship grew steadily. Daniel was patient with her, never pushing too hard, but always there when she was ready to take another step. They spent evenings talking over dinner, going for long walks through the city, and simply enjoying each other's company. It was the first time in a long time that Lily felt like she didn't have to be on all the time. With Daniel, she could just be herself. But as their connection deepened, so did Lily's fears. She couldn't shake the nagging thought that it was only a matter of time before something went wrong. She had spent so long building her walls, and now that they were starting to come down, she felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that made her uneasy. One evening, as they sat together on Daniel's balcony, the city lights twinkling below them, Lily voiced her concerns. What if this doesn't last? She asked quietly, her head resting on Daniel's shoulder. What if we end up like everyone else? Daniel was silent for a moment, then he shifted so that he could look her in the eye. Lily, I can't promise you that everything will be perfect. No one can. But I can promise you that I'm here, and I'm willing to fight for this, for us. Lily swallowed, her throat tight. I'm just scared. I know, Daniel said softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. But being scared doesn't mean you should run. Sometimes, it means you're about to do something really important. His words hung in the air between them, and Lily realized that he was right. She had spent so much time avoiding her fears, but maybe it was time to face them. Maybe it was time to take a leap of faith. With a deep breath, she nodded, her hand finding his. Okay, she whispered. I'm in. Daniel smiled, and for the first time in a long time, Lily felt a sense of peace, a sense that maybe, just maybe, this was worth the risk. Part 5, Between Love and Work. In the weeks that followed Lily's decision to let Daniel into her life, everything seemed to change. Their relationship had moved beyond cautious conversations and subtle glances. There was a newfound comfort between them, a quiet understanding that they were both stepping into something unfamiliar but exciting. Lily felt different too. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just the confident, driven project leader or the woman who lived by the strict rules she had set for herself. She felt freer, lighter, and even a bit more open to the unknown. And while that terrified her, it also thrilled her in a way she hadn't expected. Their time together had become more frequent, with evenings spent at each other's apartments, dinners at small, tucked-away restaurants, and long walks through the city where they talked about everything and nothing. Daniel was easy to be around, kind, attentive, and surprisingly funny. He had a way of making her laugh, even when she didn't want to. But as much as things were going well, there was always a voice in the back of Lily's mind reminding her that it couldn't stay this way forever. Her need for control, her fear of losing herself in the relationship, still lingered. And no matter how much she tried to ignore it, the tension between balancing her personal life with her career was slowly building. It didn't help that the project with Phoenix Technologies was growing more intense. The deadline was approaching, and the pressure to deliver was mounting. Lily found herself spending more and more hours at the office, buried under emails, conference calls, and last-minute changes. It was the kind of workload she thrived on, but it also left little time for anything else. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Lily arrived at her apartment to find Daniel waiting for her. He had let himself in with the spare key she had given him a few weeks earlier, and the sight of him sitting on her couch, casually flipping through a magazine, made her heart skip a beat. He looked up as she walked in, smiling warmly. "Hey," he greeted her, standing up to meet her at the door. "Rough day?" Lily sighed, dropping her bag on the floor and leaning against the doorframe. "You have no idea. The project is a mess right now, and I don't know if we're going to hit the deadline." Daniel wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into a comforting embrace. "You'll figure it out. You always do." Lily closed her eyes, letting herself relax in his arms for a moment. It was a rare thing for her to feel so vulnerable, so dependent on someone else for comfort. But with Daniel, it didn't feel like weakness. It felt like trust. "I'm just so tired," she admitted softly. "I feel like I'm drowning in work, and I don't know how to keep up." Daniel pulled back slightly, looking down at her with concern. "Maybe you're taking on too much. You don't have to carry everything on your own, you know." Lily shook her head, stepping out of his embrace and walking over to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of water. I can handle it. I've always handled it. Just because you can handle it doesn't mean you should have to, Daniel replied, following her into the kitchen. You don't have to be perfect all the time, Lily. It's okay to ask for help. His words hit a nerve. Lily had always prided herself on being the one who could do it all, the one who didn't need anyone else to carry the load. The idea of leaning on someone else, of admitting that she couldn't do it all, felt like failure. I'm fine, she said, her tone sharper than she intended. I just need to get through this project, and everything will be okay. Daniel watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Lily, you don't have to shut me out every time things get hard. I'm not shutting you out, she argued, though she could feel the walls going up inside her. I need to focus on work right now. That's all. The silence between them was heavy, and Lily felt the familiar tension creeping in, the fear that she was letting herself get too close, too dependent. She had worked so hard to build a life where she didn't need anyone, and now, with Daniel, she was starting to realize how much that was changing. I get it, Daniel said finally, his voice quiet but firm. You've been doing this on your own for a long time, and you're not used to having someone else there. But I'm not going anywhere, Lily. You don't have to push me away. Lily turned to face him, her heart aching with the truth of his words. She knew she was pushing him away, even if she didn't want to. It was instinct, a defense mechanism she had developed over years of protecting herself from getting hurt. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. I'm just scared. Daniel stepped forward, gently placing a hand on her cheek. I know. But you don't have to be scared with me. I'm here. And I'm not asking you to change who you are, I just want you to let me in. Lily closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. For so long, she had been afraid of letting anyone get close, of losing control. But with Daniel, she was starting to realize that maybe control wasn't the most important thing. Maybe, just maybe, letting someone in was worth the risk. I'll try, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll try to let you in. Daniel smiled, his thumb brushing gently across her cheek. That's all I'm asking. The days that followed were a whirlwind of work and personal challenges. The project at Danvers Corporation was reaching a critical point, with long hours and tight deadlines that left little room for anything else. Lily found herself stretched thin, struggling to balance her growing feelings for Daniel with the demands of her career. One night, after another exhausting day, Lily sat alone in her office, the city lights twinkling outside the window as the clock ticked past midnight. She had been working non-stop, trying to meet the looming deadline, but the pressure was starting to wear on her. Her phone buzzed on the desk, and she glanced at the screen to see a text from Daniel. How's it going? You okay? Lily sighed, feeling a pang of guilt. She had been distant with him over the past few days, too consumed by work to make time for their relationship. She typed out a quick response, it's rough. Still at the office. I'm sorry I've been so unavailable. A few moments later, his reply came, don't apologize. I know how important this is to you. Just don't forget to take care of yourself. Lily smiled faintly, her heart warming at his words. Even when she was drowning in work, Daniel was still there, steady and supportive. She didn't deserve him, she thought. He was patient and understanding, while she was constantly pushing him away. As she stared at her phone, an idea began to form in her mind. Maybe she couldn't fix everything right now. Maybe the balance between work and love was something she would always struggle with, but she could try to show Daniel that she cared, that he was important to her. How about dinner tomorrow night? She typed, her fingers hovering over the send button for a moment before hitting it. His response came quickly, "I'd love that. Let me know where and when." Lily smiled to herself, feeling a small sense of relief. It was a step, even if it was a small one. She couldn't change overnight, but she could try to make time for the things, and the people, that mattered. The next evening, Lily met Daniel at a cozy, dimly lit restaurant in a quiet part of the city. It was a place they had been to before, a spot they both loved for its warmth and intimacy. As they sat down at their table, the familiar comfort of being with Daniel began to melt away some of the stress that had been weighing on her. "I'm glad we're doing this," Daniel said, his eyes warm as they met hers. "I've missed you." "I've missed you too," Lily admitted, her heart swelling with a mixture of guilt and affection. "I'm sorry I've been so caught up in work." Daniel smiled, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You don't have to apologize. I know how much this project means to you. But I also know how much you mean to me." Lily felt a lump form in her throat at his words. She had never been good at expressing her feelings, but with Daniel, it was different. He made her want to be better, to be more open, even when it scared her. "I'm trying," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm trying to find the balance. It's just hard." "I know," Daniel said gently. "And I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure it out together." As they sat there, talking and laughing over dinner, Lily realized that maybe she didn't have to have everything figured out right away. Maybe the key to finding balance was allowing herself to lean on someone else, to let go of the need for constant control. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was starting to believe it. Part 6: Strength in Letting Go. As Lily continued to navigate the delicate balance between her professional responsibilities and her relationship with Daniel, she found herself falling into a new rhythm. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments when work took precedence over everything else, but she was learning to make space for him in her life, a space that had always been reserved for her career. Their evenings together became a sanctuary from the pressure of her job. They didn't always go out to fancy restaurants or have deep conversations. Sometimes, they simply sat on the couch, watching movies or enjoying a quiet dinner at home. And for the first time in a long time, Lily allowed herself to just be, to relax without the constant need to prove herself. But even with these moments of peace, the looming deadline for the Phoenix Technologies project weighed heavily on her. The closer they got to the final phase, the more intense the pressure became. And as much as she tried to balance everything, there were nights when the stress consumed her, pulling her back into the relentless cycle of work. One Friday evening, Lily found herself in the office well past midnight, her desk littered with notes, reports, and spreadsheets. She was exhausted, her eyes burning from staring at her computer screen for hours on end, but she couldn't stop. The project was in its final stages, and there was still so much to do. Her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel, still at the office? Lily glanced at the clock. It was nearly 1 a.m. She sighed, knowing that she had once again pushed their plans aside for work. They had planned to have dinner that night, but she had sent him a quick message earlier, apologizing and promising to make it up to him. "Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll try to get out of here soon," she typed back. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed again. "I'm coming over. You need a break." Lily's heart skipped a beat, torn between relief and guilt. She knew Daniel was right. She desperately needed a break, but she also didn't want to seem like she was failing at managing her responsibilities. Still, the thought of seeing him, of having him there to pull her out of the overwhelming stress, was more comforting than she wanted to admit. About 20 minutes later, Daniel walked into her office, carrying a takeout bag from her favorite late-night cafe. His presence immediately brightened the room, and Lily couldn't help but smile as he approached her desk. "You're a lifesaver," she said, standing up to greet him. Daniel smiled, leaning in to give her a quick kiss on the forehead. "I figured you could use some real food. You're going to burn yourself out if you keep going like this." Lily sighed, sitting back down in her chair as Daniel unpacked the food. "I know. I'm just trying to get everything perfect before the deadline." "Perfection is overrated," Daniel said, handing her a sandwich and a cup of coffee. "You're doing an amazing job. But you're no good to anyone if you're running on empty." Lily took a bite of her sandwich, savoring the taste of real food after hours of snacking on vending machine junk. As she chewed, she glanced over at Daniel, feeling a surge of gratitude. He didn't have to come here. He could have been frustrated with her for working so late again. But instead, he had shown up to support her, even when she wasn't making time for him. "I don't know how you put up with me," she said softly, her voice filled with both affection and guilt. Daniel smiled, sitting down across from her. "I put up with you because I care about you. And I know how important this project is to you. But Lily, you don't have to carry all of this on your own. I'm here, whether you need me or not." His words hit her hard. For so long, she had believed that asking for help was a sign of weakness, that relying on someone else would make her less capable. But with Daniel, it didn't feel like weakness. It felt like trust. Lily set her sandwich down, looking at him with sincerity. "I'm trying to get better at this. At letting you in. It's hard for me." "I know," Daniel said gently, his eyes filled with understanding. "And I'm not asking you to change who you are. I just want you to know that you don't have to go through life alone. You can have someone by your side." Lily nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. She wasn't used to this kind of support, this kind of love. And even though it scared her, she wanted it. She wanted him. As they finished their late-night meal, Daniel stayed with her, helping her go over some of the final project details and offering his insights. He wasn't just a distraction from her work, he was genuinely helpful, his perspective giving her a fresh outlook on some of the challenges she was facing. By the time they left the office together, the sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Lily felt exhausted, but in a strange way, she also felt lighter. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. The following week, the project was finally completed, and the relief that washed over Lily was almost overwhelming. The presentation to Phoenix Technologies had gone off without a hitch, and the client was thrilled with the results. It was one of the biggest successes of her career, and yet, when she stood in front of her team, accepting their congratulations, there was something different about the way she felt. In the past, this would have been the pinnacle of her achievement, the moment she had worked for, the validation of all her hard work and sacrifice. But now, standing there with her team, she realized that while the success was satisfying, it wasn't everything. There was more to life than just the next project, the next promotion, the next milestone. Later that evening, she met Daniel for dinner, ready to celebrate the completion of the project. As they sat at a quiet table in a candlelit restaurant, Lily couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in the past few months. She had started this journey with a singular focus on her career, determined to keep everyone at arm's length. But now, with Daniel by her side, she realized that life was about more than just control and success. "I'm proud of you," Daniel said, raising his glass to toast. "You nailed it." Lily smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you. It was a lot of hard work, but I couldn't have done it without you." Daniel shook his head, his smile soft but genuine. "You did it all on your own, Lily. I just reminded you to take a break once in a while." Lily laughed, but there was a truth in his words that resonated with her. She had always been capable of achieving great things, but now she was learning that she didn't have to do it all alone. She could lean on someone else, share the burden, and still be strong. As the evening progressed, they talked about the future, about new projects, new opportunities, and new possibilities. But for the first time, Lily wasn't thinking only about work. She was thinking about the life she could build with Daniel, about the balance she could create between her career and her personal life. It wasn't going to be easy, she knew that. There would always be challenges, moments when the old fears and doubts crept back in. But with Daniel by her side, she felt like she could face those challenges and come out stronger on the other side. Several weeks later, as summer began to fade into autumn, Lily found herself walking through the park with Daniel, the crisp evening air cool against her skin. They had developed a routine: Friday night dinners, weekend walks, and quiet evenings at home. It wasn't flashy or exciting, but it was real, and it was theirs. As they strolled through the park, the leaves crunching beneath their feet, Daniel took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. It was a simple gesture, but it meant the world to Lily. "You know," Daniel said, glancing over at her with a smile, "I think you've finally figured out this whole balance thing." Lily laughed, shaking her head. "I wouldn't go that far. But I'm working on it." Daniel squeezed her hand, his expression warm and affectionate. "That's all that matters." As they continued walking, Lily felt a sense of peace settle over her. It wasn't perfect, and it probably never would be. But for the first time in her life, she was okay with that. She didn't have to be in control of everything. She didn't have to have all the answers. All she had to do was let herself be open to love, to connection, to the possibility of something more. And in that moment, with Daniel by her side, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Part 7: A New Kind of Success. As the weeks turned into months, Lily found herself growing more comfortable in her relationship with Daniel. Their bond had strengthened, evolving from the initial uncertainty and caution to something deeper, more stable. She had finally begun to understand that allowing someone into her life didn't make her weaker or less independent. In fact, it made her stronger, more resilient. It was a quiet evening in early November when Lily realized just how much her life had changed. She had taken the afternoon off from work, something she rarely did, and was at Daniel's apartment, curled up on the couch with a book. Daniel was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, the smell of garlic and herbs wafting through the air. The scene was peaceful, and for the first time in a long time, Lily felt completely at ease. It was a stark contrast to the way her life had been before Daniel had come into it. Back then, every moment was consumed by work, by the need to prove herself and stay in control. But now, she had found a balance. Her career was still important, of course, but it was no longer the only thing that defined her. As she glanced up from her book, watching Daniel move around the kitchen, a thought crossed her mind that took her by surprise. This is what happiness feels like. It wasn't the dramatic, all-consuming kind of happiness that she had always assumed would come with success. It was quieter, steadier, and more fulfilling. It was the kind of happiness that came from being with someone who understood her, who supported her, and who made her feel like she didn't have to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. Just then, Daniel looked up and caught her staring, a playful smile spreading across his face. "What's that look for?" Lily grinned, shaking her head. "Nothing. I'm just happy." Daniel raised an eyebrow, setting down the spoon he had been using to stir the sauce. He walked over to her, sitting down on the couch beside her and wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I like hearing that," he said softly, his voice full of affection. Lily leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. "I don't think I ever realized how much I needed this, just this." Daniel pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her head. "I think we both needed it." They sat like that for a while, the quiet warmth of their connection filling the room. It was in moments like these that Lily realized just how far she had come. She had spent so long thinking that love and vulnerability were distractions, things that would derail her from her goals. But now, she understood that love wasn't about losing control, it was about finding someone who made you feel safe enough to let go. In the following weeks, life settled into a comfortable routine. The project with Phoenix Technologies had been a massive success, earning Lily even more recognition at Danvers Corporation. She was offered a promotion, one that came with more responsibility and even higher stakes. It was everything she had worked for, the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. But as Lily sat in her office one afternoon, looking over the details of the promotion, she found herself feeling conflicted. A part of her was excited. After all, this was the kind of opportunity she had always dreamed of. But another part of her, the part that had changed since meeting Daniel, was hesitant. The promotion would mean longer hours, more stress, and even less time for herself. It would mean going back to the relentless pace she had been living before she learned to slow down, to make room for the things that mattered outside of work. And for the first time in her life, Lily wasn't sure if she wanted that. She had always believed that success meant climbing higher, reaching for more. But now, she was beginning to question whether that was really what she wanted. Could she be happy with a life that wasn't defined solely by her career? Could she find fulfillment in something more balanced, more whole? That evening, after work, Lily met Daniel at their favorite restaurant. As they sat across from each other, the familiar warmth of his presence grounding her, Lily realized that she needed to talk to him about what she was feeling. "There's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice steady but contemplative. Daniel looked at her, his expression open and curious. "What's on your mind?" Lily hesitated for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I got offered a promotion at work." Daniel's smile was immediate and genuine. "That's amazing, Lily." "I'm not surprised, you've been killing it." Lily smiled faintly, but there was a weight in her chest that she couldn't shake. "Yeah, it's a great opportunity. But I don't know if I want it." Daniel's brow furrowed slightly, his gaze searching hers. "Why not?" Lily took a deep breath, feeling the words she had been struggling with for days finally rise to the surface. "Because I don't want to go back to the way things were before. If I take this promotion, it's going to mean more hours, more stress, more of everything. And I've worked so hard to find balance, to make space for other things in my life, like us. I don't want to lose that." Daniel was silent for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Lily, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You've already shown how capable you are. Whether you take the promotion or not doesn't change that." Lily looked down at their joined hands, her heart heavy with indecision. "But what if turning it down means I'm giving up on my career?" Daniel shook his head. "Turning it down doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you're choosing what's best for you. And if that means prioritizing your happiness, your health, and our relationship, then that's not a loss, it's a win." His words brought a sense of clarity that Lily hadn't expected. For so long, she had measured her success by her career, by how high she could climb and how much she could achieve. But now, she was starting to see that success didn't have to look the way she had always imagined. Maybe success was about finding the right balance, about knowing when to push forward and when to step back. "Do you think I'm crazy for even considering turning it down?" she asked, her voice quiet. Daniel smiled, his eyes soft. "I think you're brave. And I think whatever decision you make will be the right one." Lily felt a wave of emotion wash over her, the weight of the decision still heavy but less daunting now that she had shared it with Daniel. She realized that she didn't have to make the decision alone, and that was a revelation in itself. A few days later, Lily sat in her boss's office, the promotion offer on the table in front of her. She had spent the weekend thinking about it, weighing the pros and cons, and talking it through with Daniel. And now, as she looked at the opportunity that had once seemed like the pinnacle of success, she knew what she had to do. "I've given this a lot of thought," she began, her voice steady but resolute. "And while I'm incredibly grateful for the offer, I've decided to turn it down." Her boss looked at her with surprise, but there was also respect in his eyes. "That's a bold decision, Lily. Are you sure?" Lily nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. "I am. I've worked hard to get where I am, but I've also realized that success means more than just climbing higher. I want to focus on maintaining balance in my life, between my career and the things that matter to me outside of work. Her boss smiled, leaning back in his chair. I admire that. It takes a lot of self-awareness to make that kind of choice. And for what it's worth, I think you're making the right decision for yourself. As Lily left the office that day, she felt lighter than she had in months. She knew there would be moments when she second-guessed her choice, moments when the old fears and doubts crept in. But for now, she felt like she had made the right decision, not just for her career, but for her life. That evening, Lily met Daniel for a celebratory dinner. It wasn't the kind of celebration she would have had in the past. There were no corporate accolades, no fancy titles. But it was a celebration of something much more important, the choice to live her life on her own terms. As they sat together, laughing and talking over a bottle of wine, Lily realized just how much she had grown. She had spent so many years thinking that success was about control, about never letting anyone get too close. But now, with Daniel by her side, she understood that true success was about balance, about letting go of the need to be perfect and embracing the messy, beautiful journey of life. And in that moment, Lily knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Part 8: Love's Final Leap. In the months that followed, Lily's life took on a new sense of purpose. The decision to turn down the promotion had been a difficult one, but it had opened the door to a different kind of success, one that wasn't defined solely by her career, but by the balance she had worked so hard to achieve. She was still a dedicated project leader at Danvers Corporation, but she had learned how to set boundaries, how to say no when it mattered, and how to make time for the things that brought her happiness outside of work. And most importantly, she had learned that she didn't have to carry the weight of the world on her own. She had Daniel by her side, and together, they had built something real, something lasting. Their relationship had deepened over the months, evolving from the tentative beginnings of attraction into something much more substantial. They had faced challenges. Of course, there had been moments when Lily's old fears crept back in, moments when she struggled with the balance between independence and vulnerability. But with Daniel, she had found a partner who understood her, who didn't try to change her but supported her in becoming the best version of herself. One evening, as they sat together on Daniel's balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of pink and orange, Lily found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed. She had spent so many years chasing after success, believing that control and perfection were the only paths to happiness. But now, she realized that true happiness wasn't about achieving the next goal, it was about being present, about embracing the imperfect moments that made life rich and meaningful. Daniel glanced over at her, his hand resting gently on her leg. "You're quiet tonight," he observed, his voice soft. Lily smiled, leaning back in her chair. "Just thinking." "About what?" Daniel asked, his gaze curious. Lily took a deep breath, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and contentment. "About how much has changed." "About how much I've changed." Daniel smiled, his eyes filled with affection. "You've come a long way." "I have," Lily agreed, her voice thoughtful. "And a lot of that is because of you." Daniel's smile softened, and he reached over to take her hand in his. "You did this on your own, Lily. I was just here to remind you that you didn't have to do it all alone." Lily felt a lump form in her throat, her heart full of emotion. "I'm glad I let you in," she said softly. I don't think I could have gotten here without you. Daniel squeezed her hand gently, his expression warm. I'm glad you let me in too. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in a golden glow. It was moments like these that made Lily realize just how much her perspective had shifted. She no longer felt the constant need to prove herself, to chase after the next promotion or achievement. She had found a sense of peace in knowing that she was enough, just as she was. As the evening grew darker, Daniel turned to her, his expression more serious now. There's something I've been wanting to talk to you about, he said, his voice steady but carrying a hint of nervousness. Lily raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What is it? Daniel hesitated for a moment, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, velvet box. Lily's heart skipped a beat as she realized what was happening. I know we've taken things slow, and I know that we've both had to grow and learn along the way, Daniel began, his voice calm but filled with emotion. But I also know that I can't imagine my life without you in it. You make me better, Lily. You've shown me what it means to love someone, to build something together, and I want to spend the rest of my life doing just that, with you. He opened the box, revealing a beautiful, simple engagement ring that sparkled in the fading light. Lily Campbell, will you marry me? Lily's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding with a mixture of shock, joy, and overwhelming love. For a moment, all she could do was stare at the ring, her mind racing with everything that had led to this moment. The fears, the doubts, the walls she had built up, it all seemed to melt away in the face of the love she felt for Daniel. Yes, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, I will. Daniel's face broke into a wide smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then, without hesitation, he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart soar. As they held each other, the weight of the moment settling in, Lily felt a sense of completeness that she had never known before. She had spent so much of her life believing that love was something that would make her weak, something that would hold her back. But now, with Daniel by her side, she understood that love was the very thing that made her stronger. In the months that followed their engagement, Lily's life continued to evolve. She and Daniel began planning their future together, making decisions about where they would live, how they would balance their careers, and what kind of life they wanted to build. It wasn't always easy, there were moments of tension, moments when their individual ambitions clashed, but they always came back to the foundation they had built together: trust, communication, and a deep, unwavering love. Lily continued to excel at Danvers Corporation, though she had learned to set boundaries that allowed her to maintain the balance she had worked so hard to achieve. She no longer felt the need to constantly push herself to the limit, to sacrifice her personal life for the sake of her career. Instead, she had found a way to thrive in both areas, to create a life that was full and fulfilling in every sense. As the day of their wedding approached, Lily found herself feeling a mixture of excitement and calm. It was a day she had never imagined for herself. She had never been the type to dream of white dresses and wedding bells. But now, standing on the brink of this new chapter, she realized that love wasn't about the fairy tale, it was about the real, messy, beautiful journey of building a life with someone who loved her for exactly who she was. On the day of the wedding, as Lily stood in front of the mirror in her simple, elegant gown, she couldn't help but smile at the woman staring back at her. She had come so far, grown so much. She had learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that love didn't mean losing control. It meant letting go of the fear and trusting that the people who loved her would always be there to catch her. As she walked down the aisle toward Daniel, her heart full of love and gratitude, she knew that this was just the beginning. Together, they would face whatever challenges came their way. And no matter what, she knew that they would always find their way back to each other. When she reached him, Daniel took her hands, his eyes filled with the same love and warmth that had drawn her in from the very beginning. "You ready for this?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. Lily smiled, her heart soaring. More than ever. As they exchanged vows, promising to support each other through all of life's ups and downs, Lily realized that this was what true success looked like, not the promotions, not the accolades, but the love they had built together. It was messy, imperfect, and sometimes challenging, but it was real. And as they kissed, sealing their commitment to each other, Lily knew that she had found her place, right there, in his arms, ready to face whatever the future held.